Maman dit que moi je dois le faire. Et moi je dis que maman doit le faire. Wow. Ça confond, hein. Whew. Aïe, aïe, aïe. What's up, everybody? It is Friday night. And that means it is time to fight. Yes. Let's throw down with our best openings, our best concentration, our best endgame grinds. And just enjoy moving the pieces around for a while and, you know, solving a little puzzle here and there that our opponents set for us. Or that chess sets for us, right? Just an unending series of little puzzles. That's working out. Ah oui, c'est vrai, les bouteilles sont sales, t'as raison là, ça c'est vrai. Tournament's gonna kick off in 15 minutes here. We're still trying to get the kids unconscious. Have I ever been to a college or seen a campus? Yes, I have, Sam. How about you? Milk in a cup, milk in a cup. So we got two groups today. And I guess I'll open up our club here. Hi, Jay. I think I remember you. You know, today we were having our... Il y a une paille là? Une paille? Okay, très bien. Today in the dojo meeting, actually let me make sure my sound's okay. Do I have the right mic selected? Yeah. So, little behind the scenes info, you know, the chess dojo team tends to meet once a week on a Friday morning for us to discuss what we're up to. And there's a member of the chess dojo team who said they were going to a big tournament in Austin this weekend. And somebody asked, are there any other dojo people who are going to be there? And they said, Dubov fan is going to be at the tournament, I think. And I said, Dubov fan? That's Jay Anand, right? And the other team members were like, I'm not sure, is it? I don't know. I'm not sure who Dubov fan is. But anyway, you tell me if I remembered correctly, Jay Anand. Are you playing a tournament in Austin this weekend? By the way, for anyone on YouTube who wants to join the tournament, the exclam fight command doesn't work on YouTube. What you have to do is go to the link I put here, this chess.com/club/chessdojo, or that's one way to do it. And from our club page, the Chess Dojo Club, with almost 6,000 members, you scroll here and you find the links to the tournaments. Under 1,600, if your chess.com rapid rating is under 1,600. Over 1,600 or 1,600 plus if your rating is over 1,600. No, you're not playing this tournament, huh? Do you think there could be somebody else named Dubov fan as well as you? I thought you lived in India. So very confusing. We must have more than one Dubov fan, right? Because that's definitely your chess.com handle. Qu'est-ce qui se passe? Ah, bou, bou, bou. Oui, elle a raison. Elle a raison. C'est l'heure où les enfants dorment. Et les parents nettoient. Je sais, chouchou. All right. Do we have nobody on Twitch today? Nobody on Twitch today. Oui, tu m'as trouvé, hein? Okay. All right. I see not enough players in the tournament, so I'm going to send out a tweet. I don't love to send out tweets, but I will do it.
So not
Okay.
You know Mama's not today, Lily. Bye.
Thank you.
All right. I did it. I tweeted like a regular little birdie. All right. Well, and it worked. We've got 4 players in the 600 plus groups. So that's good. Our Twitch viewership is down from 2 people to 1, and I'm watching the Twitch myself to be able to see the channels. So that's me. I'm the whole Twitch crowd today. Man, what has happened to Twitch? Completely Dedicus Maximus. All right. Let's see if we've got players for the under 1600 group today. Ooh, we're just missing 1 more player under 1600. Ah, Gefilte Fish, you've brought our viewership up from 1 to 3.
What?
Thank you.
It's Daddy.
Thank you for proving that Twitch is not dead yet. All right, tournament starts in 10 minutes. We need 1 more player in the under 1600 gruppo. Yeah, this is awesome content. I'm glad you appreciate it, Sam. Recorded a podcast today with the old Uncle Jesse and Kid Kostya. Hi, Hikaru. What's up? You want to play a game of classical chess against somebody rated 1,000? I'll comment on the game live for you. Then you can go back and learn something from the commentary. You're watching on 2 different platforms to increase viewership. That's okay. Don't make me feel that pathetic. It's very nice of you to try to make me feel better. No, I'm not feeling bad. I just want 1 more player for your tournament to hold, right? We just need 1 more player under 1600. Just 1 more to kick off the tournament. Il nous faut encore un, n'est-ce pas?
Yeah.
Dis-leur, s'il te plaît, joue dans le tournoi. Exactement, très bien. Qu'est-ce qu'on peut faire de plus?
I see.
Tu veux chanter Moana pour tout le monde? Oui? Vas-y, chante. Non? Pas maintenant? Pas de chanson? Je te dirai les premiers mots, ok? I can stand at the edge of the long as.
Lily, maintenant. It's way past her bedtime, baby.
No.
Ok, tu peux aller dormir.
No.
It's impossible if it's later.
Thank you, Campbell Blythe. We made it to 4.
She tried to make me give her a different thing of milk, and I already gave her a cup of milk, and she chose not to eat dinner, and I can't. She's running away from me now. I do have everything set up right there by the bed. I need the diaper, pajamas, duties.
All right. We're getting ready to party. So.
I need to ask you something impossible, but still maybe.
Oui, je vais essayer encore. Je vais essayer encore. Let's see. Tournament starts in 4 minutes. We've got 0 for 3 right now for getting the kids into bed. So you could also score it parent 0, kids 3. Parents massive losers. Kids incredibly good at winning every contest. But it's nice. It looks like all our tournaments are going to hold. We're going to get to watch these games for a few hours and talk about them. It's going to be good. There's 2 different groups, Adult Chess Improver. One of them, you need to be sub 1600. The other, you need to be over 1600. So I'm going to hit this link for you, or this automatic moo command thing here. And you'll see there's 2 different groups. The first group is the 1600 plus, and the second link is for under 1600. So everybody's welcome, as usual. Oui, Shy? Oui, quoi? Too bad. If you're 1600, I guess you can play in either section. Sorry, did I do this wrong? Under 1600 and 1600 plus. Anyway, if you're 1600, you're welcome in either section, I guess. Whew. Has Arena started? No, it starts in 2 minutes. Yeah, gefilte fish. I've already tried to put her down like 2 or 3 times. My partner's tried a couple times, so at some point she can just cry as much as she likes. She may not realize I had other kids before her, so I'm not as weak to the crying as she's genetically programmed to think I am. This is so annoying. Interesting. All right, folks, buckle up. The games are about to start. Yeah, we're back home in California. So games are about to start. For those of you who are going to play, make sure not to listen to the live commentary during your game. Okay, some people recently have needed to be reminded of this like 10 times. But it should be a pretty basic agreement that we all have with each other. During the games, you don't listen to what David is saying about the games. You silence or close or mute the stream, even if that drops us to 0 viewers. C'est la vie. I will comment on the games live, clicking around between different games, making comments on what's going on. Then when you're done with your game, you can either go rewatch the recording, which is saved every time immediately, or you can come into chat and talk about the game with me or your opponents or whoever. But during the game, you're on your own. You want to turn everything off, make everything quiet. If you unfortunately have a cell phone like me, we're going to make it quiet. Boop. Put it away. And enjoy, everybody. Let's have fun. As we do every time. It's been 2 weeks since I've done this, because last week I was on vacation. So, feels like it's been a while. Let's see if we can get back into the swing of it, shall we? So we got d4 from Jay, who is a great fan of Dubov. And then we've got another game between Campbell Blythe and Scrytop. And Scrytop chooses e4, like Bobby Fischer. Now, I think Daniil Dubov plays a lot of 1d4, though as a modern super GM, he can play absolutely anything. Then we're going to go to the 600 plus group. And we're going to open up some of their games as well. So we've got a French defense incoming here from Knight Without Armor. And then we've got a Najdorf Sicilian. And here I see all 4 games I'm watching. Would the chess.com interface allow me to click between them? That would be amazing. Yeah. Okay, so Daniil Dubov going for a kind of Catalan setup here. Mouse slipping c3. Of course, Dubov always plays c4 in this position to work with the bishop, to put pressure on the d-pawn, and to ultimately open a file for a rook. But here by accident we get c3. And now it looks like White's trying to play the move e4 instead of c4. But Black strikes in the center first with e5. It's a scandal. Black strikes first? Daniil trading. They're playing too fast here because, I mean, if my opponent achieved e5 against me on move 8, that would be a warning that I'd been playing the whole game too quickly at this point, not paying attention to what my opponent's doing. But White just carries on after a couple seconds, just makes the trade. There we go, e4. Also played in 3 seconds. I don't really know what White's planning to even play against pawn takes pawn, and they don't know yet either, but if Black makes a move, I mean, sure, they'll blitz something out. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right. 4 seconds, knight e4. Moves a little bit risky. White certainly hasn't calculated queen takes queen, rook takes, knight e4, bishop e4, and then something like bishop c3 or bishop g3. White can save the situation with bishop h7 check, but you should really check what you're doing before playing moves like e4 and knight takes e4, initiating tactics in the center of the board. At least Guha is thinking occasionally. We can see them a couple minutes lower on the clock than our friend, the fan of Dubov. Queen e7. Check on our other game. Advanced Carl Khan. e5 here. c5 from Black, and White takes it. Agreed, gefilte fish. That was my version of being charitable. So dc5. So Black's going to have to counterattack those 2 exposed White pawns. Right now, White's up a pawn. So Black's going to have to go after these 2 pawns. There's a couple ways to do it. You could play e6. You could play queen c7. You could play knight c6. Black goes for knight c6, which I think is the main one. Now, I feel like the proper move for white looks like knight f3. I remember, without knowing any theory, that there were some games where I played knight f3 here, and my opponent played bishop g4. And then I just didn't know what to do. And I felt like, hey, I played the right-looking moves, but I just don't get it. What am I supposed to do? Should we try and figure it out together briefly here? Knight f3, bishop g4. Now, my memory now is vaguely that the right move is somehow c3, exclam. I don't yet know why. Let's see if I can figure it out. Let's say black takes my pawn. Can I take with the knight and sack the queen? Bishop here, bishop b5. That looks like a big old yes for white, right? Black king is basically checkmated, so they have to give back the queen. They don't get to recapture any pieces. I get to capture black's pieces. Oh yeah, white's up like 2 minor pieces. Wow. Okay, so no knight e5. And let's see if something's wrong with bishop takes f3. Queen takes f3. Knight e5. I guess we throw the check. Send this piece back. Get castled. So now it's black's, beautiful center against white's bishop pair. Hi, Luke. And a little bit of development for white as well, for sure. So that looks pretty pleasant for white, yeah. So c3, and black can't take the pieces. Yeah. Good point, Gefilte Fish. Maybe we should also consider c4 first without castling to put more pressure on these squares here. Perfectly reasonable. I mean, I was operating under the sense that castling, getting out of queen a5, like we still have our development lead. We can still play c4 next move if we want to, but, maybe move like a6, and then we don't have much pressure. Though there should... My sense of, like, white's time advantage here says that there should still be a way to put pressure on black, but maybe not. Okay, so I think we figured out the theory. So after knight c6, white can play knight f3 here. But Scrytop plays bishop b5 instead. Keeping the knight on c6 from taking on e5. But you have to be careful because there's tactics with queen a5. And there's the fact that we don't actually want to trade on c6. So I'm not a huge fan of playing bishop b5 when you don't even want to take on c6. Because a bishop on b5, I mean, it's kind of asking to take on c6, right? Or to waste time. Bishop f5 from black. So that's a move that doesn't put any direct tactical threats or pressure on these pawns. It looks like black just wants to develop, get the bishop outside the pawn chain. Hopefully white doesn't defend the pawn and black recaptures it. And then black wants to get everything, right? Good day, Nate. But in chess, you can't get everything. You can't be that fancy. It just can't work out. Even like knight f3, e6, knight d4. Threatening to take on f5 and on c6. That's already not great for black, probably. So I just don't believe this bishop f5 move can totally work. Yeah, Gefilte Fish. I do know that detail. Okay, white's thinking it over, which is a good thing to do. While they think it over, we'll glance at another board. Galoshi Geno. Okay, this is an interesting and controversial kind of French defense position. Let's see how they got here. Quick d takes e4. Black prepares knight f6 to maybe trade pieces. White defends with the bishop, and black strikes very quickly at the center with c5. It's rare that c5 can be a good move this early on because, you're kind of lagging in development. So instinctively, it feels like black might be overplaying their hand. Now in practice, we'll have to calculate a little bit and see if we can prove with variations that this might be wrong. Variations, I don't really see anything immediately. Because if we just trade a couple times on c5, that will develop one of black's pieces, right? It doesn't seem like that has any real potential here. If we trade here, huh? This could be a concern for black. That doesn't do anything for white. There's like some compensation here, but it's not super clear. C5. Has white done something yet? No. So like me, Gelo is needing a bit of time to solve this puzzle. And that's what chess does. It just gives you one puzzle after the next to try and figure out. So what makes sense here? I don't see anything.
Lily, go to bed.
I put away my Christmas cake. Look, show me.
I'm at my limit.
I didn't
Child
even
is awful. You can go rub her back for another fucking 45 minutes. You know what helps? This kid coming in and talking loudly instead of taking a hint, which she can't. Even when you explicitly tell her. It's not even a hint at that point. I had her calm and ready for bed, and then Lily just came in multiple times. Now, if Lupin's not gonna get to sleep, that's fucking disaster. Go to bed!
I can't sleep.
Ignore
She
her.
just starts crying.
Ignore her.
Am I okay? Aren't you playing a game, Jay?
Down your ears and let it go for 5 minutes.
Are you okay? You're not supposed to be chatting with us while you're playing. Am I okay? I don't know. Everyone in my family's screaming at once. And I can't solve this position. I'm in Geno's shoes mainly at this point, trying to figure out what white's supposed to do and unable to figure it out. Nothing I think of seems any good for white. And I'm just kind of stumped. I've been looking at castles and knight f6 and bishop g5 and takes on c5 and nothing. But yeah, mostly disturbed by the screaming in my own house. Gil Shigeno came up with a move. Let's have a look. C3. Yeah. It's a fine move if there's no amazing move. But I'm kind of perturbed that I couldn't find an amazing move, you know? Kind of perturbed. Are we going to have more endgames today, Luke? Probably. Usually some of the games go to endgames. Okay. I'm just going to look something up here. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah. Okay. Wow. Oh, like the session from yesterday, Luke. Yeah, we do that about once a week. An endgame sparring session. CD4, knight d4, knight e4, bishop e4, knight f6. I'd go to f3 probably, but let's have a little think here.
Just ignore her, don't talk.
Yeah.
Cover your ears and
Here looks best, keeping some pressure on the diagonal.
Ears a bunch. I even cover my ears with half of the Daddy.
Wait.
Zelly, says
Oui.
she wants you. And also,
Oui.
she's not letting me sleep.
Je suis vraiment désolé, mon amour.
How I sleep? I wanna not sleep.
Tu as dit qu'elle t'empêche?
Yes.
Et elle s'en fout? Elle arrête pas pour être gentille à toi?
Mhm. I even put half of my couverture
Oui.
on my left ear and half of it on my right, but I still could hear her.
Okay. Okay, I'll be right back, folks. Might as well grab some water while I'm standing. All right. Bishop f3, e5, yeah. e5, looking to kick the knight, maybe trade queens. And I figure maybe white would try queen e2 in response. Stopping pawn takes knight, developing a piece. That looks pretty good for white. It avoids the queen trade. And this move becomes just an extra pawn move for black. Not too scary. Oh, white chose bishop d3, not bishop f3. Look at that. Huh. Bishop f3 looked much more annoying to me. Oh, queen e2, queen e7, and Jay, you really need to not talk during your own games. I've told you 100 times. I can't tell you anything more. I can't talk to you while you're playing a game. I won't. So I'm just gonna ignore everything you say until your game is done. Okay? Good luck. Have fun. Bishop c5 for knight without armor. Developing that piece, preparing castling. Black looks okay here, more or less. Bishop check, bishop blocks. Bishop e3, knight d5. Maybe just castle. Castle. Should be fine. Looks like knight without armors. French defense is holding up pretty well. Luke, you can play anything against the French defense. Anything that appears logical to you. You know, they had a French defense right here this game, which I think might be why you're asking. But you know, what moves look logical to you at this point right here for white? Whatever looks logical to you, you can play it. All right, we'll click over to another game. No, we can't look at this game. Let's try here. Ooh. All right, let's see. Oh, I just figured it out, gefilte fish. Queen e2, queen e7, knight c6. But that's easy to overlook. So I can imagine maybe white didn't play bishop f3 because of e5, queen e2, queen e7. Maybe, right? Because knight b5, there's a6. The knight can't get to c7 or d6 in time. Knight a3 is terrible. And you know, if queen e2, queen e7, knight b3 or something, maybe black pushes e4. It doesn't look like it's working out for white. But queen e7, knight c6, I think refutes queen e7. And justifies my queen e2 instinct. Yeah. I can go back. So we see what's at stake here, right? White doesn't want to retreat the knight, have the queens traded on d1, something like that, right? So white tries to tempo on the e5 pawn and keep the knight here and look for a better prospect for the knight, right? Queen e7. Unfortunate for white. threatening the knight, backing up the pawn, right? And it feels like if you go back, e4 from black even, right? And we've got some problems. And knight b5, maybe with some threat. So now e4, bishop f4 might lose for black, but a6 looks okay. So in this position, probably only one good move for white. Knight c6. Hitting the pawn and the queen. So if the queen moves, you play queen takes e5 check, pretty much. Should be a great position for white. And the pawn can't really take either because bishop takes c6 check wins the rook and pawn for one knight. So, yeah. Hey, Alexander. Let's grab this position and use it as a puzzle. I'm good, Dabo. How are you? I'm glad to be back on stream here. It's like a slightly busy time, right? But whoops, that didn't get it right. Hang on. Share. PGN. Fen. Okay, that's better. Knight b5 is reasonable as well, Alex. Yeah. In this position here, knight b5, so that on queen trade, your opponent has to worry about knight c7. So you each have your king messed up. That looks totally plausible, right? And then you said maybe there could be queen b6, but bishop e3 looks super good for white, right? So knight b5 looks totally playable. I wonder if black wouldn't answer with this a6 move anyway. The point of which is, you know, queen takes, king takes, force the knight to a3 kind of thing. Maybe. I mean, it's certainly within reason. It's playable for white. I don't know if it's the best option. It looks playable. I think this queen e2 move is more of a refutation of what black's doing, right? Oh, the knight wasn't defended? Thank you, Alex. Oy, oy, oy. Yeah, bishop e3, queen b5. Okay. So queen b6 looks pretty plausible then. Maybe white tries queen e2 there. I don't know. But yeah, queen e2, queen e7, knight c6, I think is going to be white's best option. That looks like it more or less refutes black, yeah? Studying Dvoretsky's Endgame manual in the park sounds great, Dabo, yeah. Okay, so let's see the game. The bishop went to d3. Bishop went to c5. They each castled. White develops. Black comes back. Okay, so that's something for white. Queen c2. h6. Bishop h4. Okay, so white makes a little threat to h7. Black dodges out of it with h6. All good. All right, Daniil. So you finished your game. With 15 more minutes on the clock than you started with. Uh-oh. Looks like that move might have been a mistake right towards the very end, huh? There's a trick to this position, Jay, which is the only squares on which the opposition matters are the E file. So you want to stay off the E file, and the moment your opponent goes to the E file, you can take the opposition. Or if they go here, you can take the opposition. And then there's not really anything to do. So staying on the F file, I think, is the trick. And then black got the opposition and just walks the king in. Yikes. So probably the king and pawn ending's a draw, right? Unless you could even do better with king e4 after this not cautious move from the opponent. One move before you could go to here, right? Oh, you're right as well, Dabo. Yeah, he's got a full free tempo left. c4. Wouldn't white be winning now? It looks like here white's winning the king and pawn ending. That seems very clear, right? Whichever way the king goes, the white king gets in further. But black moves the pawn, white moves the pawn. White gets tempoed, and then here, Jay, you could still play this a4 move. As Dabo points out, there's still a pawn move left. And then your opponent has no more moves to waste, and their king will have to back up, saving you. And they should step off of the E file. If they step back on the E file, then you win. So they should step away from the E file, and if you come forward, they can hold you off like this. Now, if you come backward, you'll lose to this move. Right? So you, again, want to step off of the E file, and if they come forward, you block them. And so it should be a draw. So the game went from a draw to a win to a draw to a loss in just a few moves there at the very end in this king and pawn ending, right? Here it's a draw. Now you're winning. Now it's a draw. Now you're losing. So, king and pawn endings. Very careful. They're very, very precise. Yeah, good basic position for learning the opposition. All right, let's see one of the other games we got here. We got this one. So Campbell spends 2 moves to put the bishop on this dream square and claim that white's knight's not good. White defends e5 with the bishop. Defends the pawn on c5 with the queen now as soon as black plays e6, threatening to develop the bishop. Wow. Interesting. Very committal to plop the queen there. Knight d2 feels really good for white to me because now if there's ever a trade on f3, we can bring the knight here and keep these squares defended. If I were Campbell, I would strongly consider trading off this knight at this point. Not only busting this pawn structure, but hurting white's control of these sort of 2 squares, which are often key in the French defense. It's not very easy to do fillet gefilte fish. Yeah, we can get back to your question when we get back to that board and talk about it more. But yeah, those positions are pretty hard to turn into a kingside attack for white. Somewhat rare that it works. Yeah, Luke, I'd figured out that you were a kid, but it seems like you're a kid who likes endgames, right? I guess messing up the king side for black. If they take with the rook, they won't be able to castle there. If they take with the pawn, then they won't want to castle there. And that's where we're at. Campbell's a little bit surprised and trying to figure out which recapture is the best positional decision. Right, bishop h6 may seem unnecessary, Alexander, but there's a positive idea to it, right? Which is that either recapture makes this not a great area for black to put their king. And then the other reason is, you know, as you said, we're fighting over d4 and e5. This knight's going to come to f5. Chase our queen away somewhere. Maybe win the pawn on h4. So I don't know if bishop h6 is forced. It seems like white elects this move, but it doesn't strike me as illogical. It might be a good one. And yeah, if I had to choose, I would take with the rook like you, Alexander, and like Campbell. This keeps the pawn structure intact, which I care more about than the tempo about castling. Even here, you know, we could just go king f8, king g8 at some point, something like that, and we can slowly coordinate the king and rook. I'd rather be a bit slow about this in a locked position than take on doubled isolated h-pawns. For me, these pawns are heinously bad here. So I would go for rook h6 just like black did. Gefilte Fish believes in black's position here, huh? All right, Jay. Good luck with that. Black is still down a pawn, but they have the bishop pair. Queen a4 suggests white might be playing for a quick knight d4 here. Pressure black on c6 pretty heavily, because we're also moving the queen away from defending c5, which had been very important for white on previous moves. So I feel like white's going for yeah, like quick pressure against this square here. You can play knight d4 and you can bring this knight to b3, so it's ready to join in on a5 or after a trade of the d4 knight. This looks pretty scary to black to me, because black's down a pawn, so they have to prove something. But now white's starting to threaten to win a second pawn. Black doesn't have an obvious counterplay on the board, so they have to handle this really precisely and energetically, I think. They have to be happy with lines like this. White wins a second pawn, but rook c8 wins back at least one, bringing out the black pieces a little bit quickly. Right. And black's bishops look pretty good. Pawn structure is compact. Everything about black's position is good other than being down one pawn, so honestly, they're doing okay. Excuse me. White's real goal is not just to try and maybe win a pawn over here. It's also to find use for these pieces with knight d4 and knight b3. So if black just dodges out of the c6 issue, gets developed, doesn't allow knight d4. Not sure that queen a4 is that effective. Black's played king f8. That's my move. Philidor and Lucena are both beautiful, beautiful concepts. And a nice thing about them is they're reasonably easy to learn, in my opinion. And once you've learned them, they improve kind of your feel for most king rook endgames. So, yeah, I highly recommend Philidor and Lucena positions as something for players in the, I don't know, 1400 range to learn. We've got them in the dojo training program, the Philidor and Lucena, around that point. So, yeah, good stuff. Gefilte Fish correctly points out that Black's just played a couple really nice moves in a row here. Knight h6, the choice on rook takes h6, king f8. They may not be the engine's top move, but they're David's top moves. And see, the priority here with king f8 is not allowing knight d4, right? And that's what we're getting out of the way of. Elle continue à faire du bruit. One sec, folks. One sec. Qu'est-ce qu'elle fait? Elle chante, elle pleure, elle parle.
She keeps on saying, I want mom.
Apologies, folks. My kids just don't want to sleep tonight. Dobwai feeling pretty comfortable against the Jobava, just playing very, very simple moves recently. You know, d5, knight f6, bishop f5, e6, bishop to d6 to trade the dark squared bishops, you know, c5, knight c6. Just very, very simple stuff. Thinking about b4 here for white in this game. Let's see what Scrytop did. They must have played one move while I was gone. Knight b3, defending the pawn. But it allows bishop f3, doesn't it? Black doesn't play this move. But bishop f3 with the idea of knight e5 looks very good for black. So... is it because white has some trick here? Yeah, I guess this is not at all clear for black here. See you, Anon. Good luck with everything. Oh, thank you, Jesse. Very kind of you to send your friends our way. Folks on Twitch, here's a link where you can follow Jesse February. Chess player, Twitch streamer. Lovely person. And to those just joining us, very quickly, I'll tell you what we're up to here. We've got a weekly program, Friday Night Fights. People playing classical games against each other. We've got two sections, under 1600 and over 1600. The under 1600s play a 45-minute plus 30-second per move time control. And the over 1600s play 90 minutes plus 30-second time control. So, you know, we get some 3+ hour games here, some real classical chess, and I comment on the games live as they're played. So folks can go back later and see what I said about their games. So yeah, I'm seeing bishop f3, bishop c6 would be pretty messy. So I understand, actually, I can see why black didn't just go straight into that. Instead plays queen c7, threatening e5, and defending c6. I mean, part of me feels like instinctively black had to work on bishop f3 and try and find some good line there. And the reason is I think this bishop can kind of get left behind after a queen c7 move. White hasn't moved yet after queen c7, but let's say white now took, right? Took. Oh, yeah, there's not knight d4 yet because of queen e5. Okay, so black's okay. As long as they have queen e5, they're okay. But if white were able to do this, you know, and then play f3 and the bishop's just kind of weird on g4, that would be very much a disaster for black. But okay, white can't do that, so queen c7 should be okay. White has traded on c6, though, so we'll see how that goes. That's taking pressure off of e5. Maybe there's a possibility to now throw in bishop f3. That's not as good. Yeah, okay, bishop f3 looks playable even here, actually, yeah. Bishop f3. And then if bishop b7, maybe queen check. Yeah. Or in bishop g2 first. And then if they take, instead of taking here, we take this with check. Move the king along. Oh no, that defends. It was so close to brilliant. Complicated position it's suddenly become. Complicated. Here black's thinking. Obviously they can recapture on c6 with the pawn or the queen. Or they can take on f3 with the bishop. I mean, here's one move that's not good. The queen takes. Because this, by taking the pressure off e5, it allows white to do the dream scenario I mentioned to you before, right? Of moving the knight away from this bishop without hanging queen takes e5. Now that bishop on g4 is just kind of silly and out of it. And the white knights can do a lot of cool things on the queen side around these two weak c-pawns. They can nimbly fight around that better than these bishops can suddenly. So this would be one terrible move for black, right? That means there's bishop takes f3 or pawn takes c6 here. Black's played pawn takes c6. Bishop takes f3 looked really, really interesting. How do I rate the Carl Khan? Perfectly good opening. Yeah, this doesn't look terrible. There's still a threat of bishop f3. And white's pieces are not that free. So far, it looks like this whole idea of going queen a4 with a queen that was... sorry, not on f4, but on d4. With a queen that was defending both of these two pawns, it looks like the queen a4 idea is not quite working, right? Like black's sort of maybe semi-refuting it is even a little strong way of putting it. Like it's sort of like queen a4 just doesn't quite work, you know? Just doesn't quite work. White's struggling to keep c5 and e5 defended. White's given up two bishops for two knights without really achieving anything extra. And the main moves you'd be considering here for white are bringing the queen back to somewhere like d4 or f4 to keep that e-pawn defended. So, yeah, it doesn't seem to be going well. Possibly white could play knight fd4 and sack the e5 pawn anyway, just to coordinate the knights in a positive way. Queen e5 check, maybe come here. Idea to play maybe f3, maybe take here, maybe rook e1. White's just chosen queen f4, so going back and defending the pawn, and yeah, black feels really safe here. They could consider a fancy move, rook f6, because the pawn can't take here. White would have to do something like queen e3, and then the rook could come here, I guess. Knight d4, bishop c5. If white moves the knight, taking on e5 becomes pretty devastating. Maybe we have to castle queenside here. Bishop f3 played. Okay, because queen f3, queen e5 check. Makes a lot of sense. And then pawn f3, you can go rook f6 to f5 there, perhaps. Or some other option, yeah. The e5 pawn's not easy to hold on to here for white. I mean, honestly, like rook f6 is the first move I look at because it's shiny. But if the point is to win the e5 pawn, this might be the most effective move. I know the bishop and the rook hate it, right? But in terms of pure efficacy, I mean, it seems to just kill that center pawn where it stands, right? And then we're just looking to do this. Like, what could go wrong for black now, right? Situation looks very healthy for black. GF3 played, and black is reflecting here now. There might also be bishop f6. You know, maybe if we don't want to double pawns, maybe bishop f6 is a good enough way to take this pawn as well and prioritize getting the bishop out. Yeah, that's even better than pawn f6, right? Because pawn f6 leaves the pawns around our king a little bit funny. This is a very clean pawn structure right now. What if we go bishop f6? There's just no one to defend the pawn, right? And then compared to my queen e5 position before, look at this version, right? That's really strong. All right, so black's thinking here. So we got 3 different pieces to f6, and I think in the end the bishop is stronger than the rook or the pawn, but Dabo, you're looking at this sort of throwing in the queen to avoid that ultimate disaster, I guess, but this position is not really going to be playable for white. Their rook and knight aren't particularly well placed. No reason to think they'll beat a queen, or no reason to believe they'll compete with a queen. Okay, Campbell's still thinking, which I love to see. A5 played off to the side. Ideas A4, knight D4, bishop takes C5. But it's missing the simplicity of just going straight after E5. So I think Campbell didn't expect this pawn in the middle of the board to just be dead here. You know, he's used to white being able to play rook E1 or something, keep it going. And I think he must not have seen that these moves were just winning the E5 pawn. So that kind of helps white back into the game. Let's see how our French defense is going here. So around here, I was asked, you know, can you create a kingside mating attack for white in this kind of position, this kind of structure? And I said very, very rarely. Especially if you put your queen on c2 behind the bishop, right? If you want to create some kind of an attack, you have to go bishop c2, queen d3. And even that, I mean, I don't think it's super likely to work. Sometimes people try queen f3, so the queen has access to these squares to create threats. And rook d1. But it's pretty hard to make it happen. You need to really mass pieces on the king side, maybe get a rook lift while your opponent doesn't do too much. There's been a thing in my eye all day. I think it's trying to come out. Hey, Ridge himself. 1 second. I'm going to see if I can't rinse it out. No luck just yet. All right. All right, so knight f3, knight d5. So white centralized the rooks. Now black makes some trades. The knight gets access to this square here, or maybe this square. So white's going to have to watch for that. Knight coming in. But at least this bishop is always going to be in range of white's knight. Something that can be really, really annoying in these positions. Sometimes that bishop on b7, becomes really good. And you can't touch it. And it just keeps aiming at your king side. It's like a wood chip or something. A small one. But inside my eye, it feels really big. So white does make the trade. Black doesn't choose to take the queen off the file and leave room for the rook, huh? A little bit odd. Knight e5 makes sense. Putting some pressure on this file. This looks like... Oh, taking with the queen, there was going to be the check, huh? Okay, Tucker and Dabo are all up on it. They're saying here, you're going to walk right into this move. Yeah. Oh my god. And knight e7, knight e5 looks crummy. But maybe it's not totally losing to play knight d5. White can push things with c4 though, folks. Like really just straight up push, attacking these pieces. Idea is that knight b4, I mean, it's not helping you at all anymore, right? I could be fancy with bishop h7, but I think the very simplest possible move here is working, right? We just attack the knight. And if it takes our piece, I mean, great. I don't know. This might allow queen a5, huh? Gotta be careful. And this might allow bishop c6. Huh. So chess is concrete. Put the queen here to stop queen a5. Threaten the knight. Now knight takes, rook takes, wins because there's no queen a5. And knight a2, queen a3 doesn't work. Alexander, in this position, knight f3 defends, but our point was to win a piece. If you're talking about this variation here, right? The point of this line was not for white to defend, it was for white to win by force. This queen sneaking off of the hidden attack of the rook with a tempo saves the lost piece. So that's like an absolute no-no for white. We need to win by force. And I think c4, knight b4, queen c3 does it. There it looks like black's done, right? We're threatening the knight, and we're threatening knight d7, where the queen can't recapture because of check. That's nothing left here for black. So, king h8 played. Makes sense, but loses horribly. Anyway, to bishop a6, to bishop e4, to... Maybe bishop e4 is like the easiest. A black plays rook c7 if they want to grovel. Okay, cool, Odd. I think that you'll get a pairing at some point, so just relax and prepare yourself mentally for a huge battle. Hikaru's fine, Hikaru. Just a fine opening. So what's the best move here? Okay, part of me is saying bishop g6 is playable. Yeah, Tucker, it's every Friday and it started about an hour ago. So this move here is very forcing because we're triple threatening the bishop, right? Take here, threatening the knight. Rook here. Now, black can't go rook b8 because we would trade and play knight d7, winning the rook. Black can't play f6, kicking the knight, because we go rook e7, queen e7, knight g6, check. Feels like black's in very bad shape in this version. They're down a pawn and pieces are really cramped in badly. So it's not winning a piece. You know, at this level here, you wouldn't resign over this. In fact, even at a GM level, they probably wouldn't yet resign for black. They'd probably keep struggling a bit, but it's very powerful, very close to winning this kind of a sequence here. And knight d7 here instead of rook, Alex. Wherever the rook goes, you can chase it with an attack on the queen, huh? And win in exchange. Plus leave black with bad pawns in that position. That looks very good as well. Yeah, that might be even better, Alex. Okay, in the game, white releases tension in order to win this pawn here. But they release all their positive tension, so they'll be up a pawn, but with no pressure. You see what I mean? Like all the black, the queen's going to unwind now compared to the position where she was trapped on e8 with a knight on e5, a rook on the 7th, right? Like they say a rook on the 7th is pretty much worth a pawn, and I think that first position that I came up with, which may not look overwhelming to some of you, this position, a computer is probably going to give a heavy evaluation because the computer can probably see far enough to white winning a second pawn off of this rook's pressure against b7 and f7, you know, just a move like queen b3 or something coming. And so a computer is going to say that's 3 connected passed pawns with nothing wrong with white's position, right? So a computer which doesn't make mistakes, it'll just trade stuff for white and basically win 100% from somewhere like this. So it may or may not look super impressive to all of you, but it's pretty darn good. Comparatively, this position here is less good, and maybe everyone can appreciate the comparison, right? That if I just do something like this and the bishop comes back and the knight comes out, this is more of a game for black than the other one, right? Because there isn't that dominating rook that was really kind of hurting black positionally in the other version. That's a very, very big difference. Well, Alexander, yeah, a rook on the 7th is worth a rook plus a pawn, basically, right? They say, like, getting your rook to the 7th is often comparable to winning a pawn. There's plenty of exceptions, though, so, you know, it's case by case, not a mathematical rule. But often you can win an endgame just off of getting a rook to the 7th, right? Even with equal material. Just as sometimes you can win an endgame just because you're up one pawn. So it's a pretty strong advantage, a rook on the 7th like that. You could feel it, right? I mean, you saw that knight on e7, queen on e8, black groveling to defend f7. You could feel that position was just tough to move around in from black's side. I know you felt it. Okay, so queen c6, bishop retreats, and black gets, you know, like a touch more into the game here. Well, more than a touch. I mean, it's like you're down a pawn, but otherwise you're just playing a game of chess. So there's definitely fair chances to move the pieces to good squares and provide significant resistance. So Geloshigeno, white in that game, we can say that they didn't quite maximize what their position had, right? Maybe they didn't feel how good their position was, but they sold it slightly short. Okay, so what's going on here? This is our Najdorf that we've seen the least of today. Black snacks a pawn there. And then wants to, you know, maybe unwind with a knight on f6. If white tries this pawn sack for checkmate, knight takes will defend the checkmate. Not so easy, Mr. Bambisi. What I play against e4? I play e5, c5, e6, and c6 in tournaments, pretty much. So French, Caro, Sicilian, and double king pawn. All the A tier openings, we could say, right? Like, I don't play center counter and Aljechin's defense in tournaments pretty much ever. I've maybe played the Pirtz once or twice, but not a lot. I feel like all three of those openings are a significant tier below the four that I do play. So, I mean, I don't know that they're completely unplayable. I think if somebody, you know, was really into it and prepped it, they could play it without losing, but I don't want to play it regularly. Oh, I remember one game where I played the Aljechin defense. So I have played it at least once in a tournament in the US Championships, I think. But very rare. It was against a player who was not very aggressive in the opening. It was very specific for that opponent that I played it. So I don't want to say that for sure I haven't played those openings ever, but I haven't played them regularly. Yeah. How do I decide what I play? Asks M. Maxing. Yeah, that's a complicated question. I don't even always know the answer to how I choose what openings I play. Partly based on my mood, sometimes based on my opponent's strengths or weaknesses. You know, depending on the opponent, sometimes I want to play an opening in which I think they're weak. Sometimes I want to play an opening in which I think they're strong to make the game more fun if I think I'm better than them. That depends. Sometimes it's what I've studied recently. I mean, here's the comparable question, M. Maxing. How do you decide what you eat? Right? Like, you might like a few different foods. right? So tomorrow, how are you going to pick what you eat? You just kind of have some kind of a mood or a feeling, right? You think of something and you think, oh yeah, that'll be fun or that'll be interesting. I did that recently and I liked it, or I haven't done it in a while and I like it, or you're like, oh, these ingredients that are at hand, I recently bought some tomatoes, so I'll do this food that uses nice tomatoes. And similarly for me, like that might be like, oh, I recently, looked at an interesting idea in the tomato opening, so maybe I'll play the tomato opening tomorrow. Philidor's not terrible either, Dabo, yeah. That falls within double king pawn, although when I've played double king pawn, I've played mostly knight c6 and kind of classical Ruy Lopez's, like in the direction of, Chagorins or Briars, something like that. Or Marshall, of course. Marshall is a good move order for black. When I was younger, I played a lot of Latvian Gambit, but it's been a while. And I may have played the Petrov once or twice, but not a lot. Would I ever play Blitz against the people watching the stream? Sure. Not during Friday Night Fights, but during other shows, yeah. Sometimes I just come on stream with no particular agenda and just answer random questions or play Blitz. And other times I have a plan in mind and then I can't just drop my plan. Dabo, you're saying kind of like a modern-y kind of opening? E4, D6, D4, knight F6, knight C3, C6, in the position where G6 would have been a Pirt, C6 there. I can tell you I don't believe in that move C6 there on move 3. In addition to already not really totally believing in knight F6, D6. I don't believe that C6 move. It just doesn't make sense that it should be good enough against what White's doing with E4 and D4. It's, Black's committing to these tiny little pawn pushes that just aren't good enough. When I was younger, I would play very aggressively, like F4 in that position, and then I think some GMs would play something like Queen A5, and then what? Bishop D2, Queen B4. So I don't know. It doesn't make sense. Black shouldn't be okay there. Black shouldn't be okay. What's the worst opening I've played? Maybe one knight H3. But also, Luke, it depends. Do you count all the games I played as a kid or just the games I played since I was a master? When I was a kid, I sometimes played one knight H3 in tournaments. And that's fairly bad. As Dabo says, the Latvian might be just as bad or worse. I kind of stopped playing the Latvian around the time I made Master. I think that's about when I stopped playing it. I remember losing one or two frustrating Latvian games when I was in the 2100s trying to make Master. It took me a whole year, and I was sort of like trying to beat other experts and gain a few more rating points to make it to Master, and I just couldn't do it. And I remember one or two bad games with the Latvian that year. Is the King's Gambit close to one of the worst I've played? No, I don't think so, Alexander. I've played much worse openings than the King's Gambit. I would say the Benoni is worse than the King's Gambit, and I've played the Benoni, when I was master level against grandmasters and other top players. So no, the King's Gambit is like a bit inferior, but I've definitely played more suspicious stuff than that. I've played the Budapest, which feels a little bit bad. I don't know for sure how bad supercomputers think these different openings are because I haven't looked them all up. Some of them are so bad that, they weren't on my agenda to look up once the computers got really good. It's like, oh wait, now that computers are so good, let me see what it says about, you know, the Budapest. No, I didn't even bother looking. I just assumed it's not very good. But I definitely think I've played some worse openings than the King's Gambit by a bit. That move you're calling the Rosa Gambit, Hikaru, on Twitch, I think a lot of people call that the Schliemann. That's what I think of it as, the Schliemann. And yeah, it's pretty interesting. Hey Scott, how's it going? See what's happened here. So A5, A4, and now Campbell goes after the pawn on E5, right? As we mentioned. So it's good that Campbell noticed it. I wonder if Campbell considered that this move bishop F6 is even better than pawn F6. I didn't immediately think of it, but going for the queen trade. Knight D4. Oh my gosh. I think they had a shared mutual blindness here, even though they were spending time thinking about their moves. White plays knight d4, and black assumes brilliant move, leaving the queen hanging. After queen takes queen, white's going to play knight e6, check, win the pawn on e6, and then capture the queen on f4. But you see the problem? But black believed white and played bishop c5, which in a way is clever because there isn't knight e6. The rook defends it here. But, oh man, could have just taken that queen with check, chomp, a Reno. Queen g4, better than the King's Gambit. Queen g4 allows knight f6, hitting the queen. Queen g4 is terrible. How could the King's Gambit be worse than that? That's hard to believe, Armoda. That's hard to believe. That's evil. I guess the point of queen g4 is on knight f6 to play queen g3 instead of defending the e-pawn. And if knight e4, you have queen e5 check, sort of surviving. And if black plays knight c6 and you play knight c3, your queen's not so bad on g3, tickling g7. But I don't believe that's better than the King's Gambit. In the starting position, Dabo, there's still a pawn on d7. Back on the mainland this week, Scott, yeah. Okay, let's move on from this. The queen's got traded. And white's going to take back that pawn on e5, bishop f2, knight e5. Now we've got a very competitive endgame here. Equal material. Some pawn weaknesses on both sides. The bishop can sometimes outclass the knight a little bit in a long game. But the rook on h6 is also a little bit weird to coordinate. So it's not super obvious who's better here. My experience tells me black by a tiny bit. All right, let me see what's going on here. Oh. Yes, your line, Hikaru, on Twitch is a well-known main line, considered to be pretty good for white. A couple people suggesting f4 here for white, trying to trap that bishop. Yeah, that could be a little problematic for black. You would have to calculate rook c4. I think this is the move Scrytop was thinking about, with the rook getting pretty active here. Maybe losing a pawn for white. So white plays b3, taking that square away from the rook. Very hard to highlight a square. 13 minutes each. Very good time usage by both Scrytop and Campbell. They're taking their time and also saving some of their time. So they should have enough time to play this endgame. Yeah, Alexander, I'm sure at some point the rook's gonna take up its position somewhere a little more active than h6. Those are both plausible squares. What are your evil intentions with e5, Alexander? To bring the rook all the way over here? It's going to be quite risky to cut off the bishop's retreat, as you say. To me, rook f6 would be the most simple or basic move here. As clamored for by Alex earlier. Just, threaten the pawn, improve the rook, make f4 less attractive for white. Yeah, especially with this rook still trying to defend here, it might be nice to start threatening these pawns more quickly. Yeah. Bishop d6 is a normal move, but if we don't have to play bishop d6, the bishop's bothering white a little bit here, right? So I definitely see how far can we press white with rook f6 right here. What do they have a rook h3 resource? Do they have to play rook df1? If they play rook df1, what's our maximum from there? Yeah, bishop d6 to maybe go rook g6, and it's just a great square for the bishop, tucked away safely. Yeah. But white shouldn't be too bad, The position should be close to equal. It shouldn't be anything dramatic here. Campbell's done something. Rook f6, rook f1, and then Chekaruski. Offering that potential trade, but the black rook will be very good on f4, so white has to think twice about it. Interesting. Yes, of course, Tucker. I prefer to analyze without the engine, because then my brain gets a workout, and I remember a little bit more of what I figure out if I have to work for it. But this past year or year and a half, I've started more often checking my analysis with the engine to compare and see, what did I miss? What kind of things did I miss? And try and pull in some new ideas from the computer engines. White's still thinking. Let's just click around a little bit. See one of our other games. Galoshigeno. Remember, brought this bishop back, transferred it to the long diagonal, pressuring b7. Very nice. And now double rooks on the d file. Only thing is, White might need a look for the king at some point, depending on how the fight on the d file goes. But looks pretty promising with this coming next. Nicely played. Nicely played by White. There's this bishop b7 idea here as well. Yeah, that's very nice. Couple sequence of moves from Galoshigeno in that game. In our other game, which is very madness, rook g1. Going after this, knight f6 coming out. Queen e1 here. So White wants to take on h4, but that's going to sack a full rook here, huh? I think the move will be rook g2 to stop bishop f2 and just renew the threat of queen h4. I think that's good enough for White here. Here's one line here, 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 here. And black can't take the rook because the mate's coming in too fast over here. G6. Pawn takes, still threatening mates. Yeah, just too strong. Bishop d4, the rook can take it. Rook g2 was just played, and black plays knight d5. So I guess queen h4 it is for White next. What's black looking at? Knight f4 or something? G6 fails to rook g6 too, you think? Okay, I wasn't sure about rook g6. I didn't see an immediate mate. And then I realized that pawn takes g6 was so simple mate that I chose not to cut off my brain calculating rook g6, which I didn't think would be useful for all of you. Oh, hi G. Family's looking well. Hope the parents are looking well too. I actually only know that the kids are looking well at the moment, so I hope the parents are doing okay as well. Oh, that's a nice find by Alex. Let's put this line on the board. After queen h4, if knight f4, trying to deal with the rook before White has time to play a move like queen h6 or queen f6 or pawn f6, White can win by just using the rook to get rid of one pawn, and that's enough. Then f6 check, opening up the bishop, and mate. Beautiful, clean combination for White. Very nice. So there's no knight f4 coming here from black. Akil has just gone for queen h4. So now black primarily needs to be prepared for this move f6, I think. That's kind of the big threat, so to speak, from White here. Oh, Dabo, you're gonna go through some of the positions from. Oh, cheers, Hikaru. Have a good day, Jay. You're gonna go through some of the Dvoretsky stuff you learned. Yeah, Alex, the bishop's covering that square backwards, huh? But you might be able to overwork the bishop, Alex, with rook g1. I mean, that's really asking for like an ultra brilliancy, which may not be the most efficient. But let's play b3 to see if your combination works, just for funds, right? Hey, Lucky J, yeah. Yeah, I've been pretty well. So, check out Alexander's combination, folks. Rook check. Okay, right in the face, only one legal move. F6 with the idea of queen h7 mate. So we got to get the knight back here to cover that. Now Alex wanted to play queen g5, but we saw the bishop was covering it, so we go for overloading here on the bishop. The queen would love to be able to take through the bishop, right? And leave the bishop to cover g5, but can't be done. So bishop check, rook check, bishop has to take it, right? I mean, you can look at knight to g4 for a second as well and see. It's good to look at every legal move once you're getting this close to checkmate. You know, just double check everything. Yeah.
I've been struggling to go to sleep.
Right.
And I don't know what to do other than ask you to stop talking so loud. And if you have any ideas.
Is his sister still awake?
No, she's asleep.
Oh, so then what's bothering him?
He said that he kept being sleepy and then she was bothering him and now he's not sleeping when he can't fall asleep. Like if you were to fall asleep and then get woken up.
Huh.
But he didn't fall asleep and get woken up.
Right.
But he's been unable to fall asleep on his own.
Okay.
I just rubbed his back for it felt like forever.
Yeah, it was forever. I thought you were dealing with his sister for him.
It was very hard to stay awake.
Yeah.
I wondered if you have any ideas.
No, not really. You're just gonna have to lie there and rest. That happens sometimes. Okay, so we go rook g1, overloading that bishop. It has to take. Queen g5, king here. Take the knight with check. That was the only legal move at this point, right? Only legal move. King h8. Check. Here. Check. Here's the only legal move again. Check. Here. And mate. So the whole concept actually works. That's like an extreme combination. That's like, Book of Combinations combination. Where you wonder, did that ever really happen in a game? Now, it might slightly be marred by the fact that f6 might also win very easily here. You know, because I said that's like the main threat. Let's grab the position real quick so I can look it over later. Because that's pretty special. If I could edit the position slightly so that f6 isn't winning, but only the long combo is winning, then I can make a beautiful puzzle out of it. All right. So let's keep going with the game. In the game, Colton played f6. So that stops pawn f6 big time, right? And really keeps the bishop from getting here for these checkmates. Here I'd probably have to think for a while if I were Akil, and yeah, Akil is thinking. That makes sense. Bishop c4, there's queen c4, it's nothing special for white. We have the only light squared bishop, so this is tempting to do something on this diagonal. But b3, knight c3 check is too strong for black. We can't do that. What to do from Akil's side? Yeah, I looked at b3 Stamen, and basically I don't believe it. Because, I mean, one simple thought for black is to, take the rook. And then there's no knight on d5, so if white goes bishop c4, black can just put a pawn there. Hard to believe this is going to work out for white down a rook. Plus, black has this resource of queen d4 or bishop d4, either to trade white's queen or to go for their own mate, right? And then on top of that, I realized, maybe black can do something like queen c3, here, something like that. I guess not. There's always rook d4. But knight c3 check is just too good. So we need something else. There is an idea of rook to g4 here, right? And Chase McCoy suggested it with the idea of just trying to play bishop c4. Very logical. Queen h5 is possible. Yeah, to me, bishop c4 is not really a possibility because you're trading off that bishop and then you're trading off, into an endgame, most of your aggressive potential. You're currently down a pawn and giving up your good bishop. Just doesn't feel very likely that you'd have a good position or even any real chance at equality. If we play a very blunt, like queen g4, queen g3, something like that, black plays rook f7, and I don't really see anything wrong with it. Probably, Alex, after rook g4, we would be threatening bishop c4. Now, almost any black move might deal with it, but imagine, for instance, a3. Maybe a slightly unfortunate move for black that I could come up with that has some logic to it, right? Because of knight c3. So if I play a3, bishop c4, going after the knight, bishop d4, I take, right? And this knight looks dead. Plus, when that bishop gets control of the diagonal, the black king is in real danger. So I would say yes, rook g4 truly threatens bishop c4, but probably black has moves to deal with it. Maybe bishop d4 to block the rook off from there, maybe something else. Can knight c3 check be played without pawn pushes? At some point, maybe. There are some tricks where sometimes you can play knight c3. At the moment, I don't think black's threatening it yet, m-maxing, but it can be threatened at some point. So white's in a slightly tough position here, yeah, because they're down a pawn and we're not seeing any great option for them. Akil played bishop e4, going after that knight, and since we didn't see anything better, we have to say, it's a good job that Akil spent time thinking, looking for something here. It's a good job that Akil stopped thinking at some point when there wasn't anything. There's no use flagging, right? You just have to keep playing with some kind of move. So... I guess we'll see how it goes from here, but it feels likely to be very good for black, I think, right? They can play knight here, covering the light squares with that knight. Well placed. d5. Bishop's pretty anchored. Yeah, it's just nice to be up a pawn. So... Oh, keep maneuvering this bishop, huh? That'll generate some major threat once it gets to g6. So knight e7, bishop f3 is quite a question, yeah. Yeah, interesting. I don't personally see how knight c3 right now works if white takes it. Jared? Yeah, to me, I don't really see what the follow-up is on knight c3, and I'm afraid that by sacking the knight, we're going to let white play this crushing bishop d5 move. So I'd rather just put my knight anywhere and cover that square with my knight. Keep the bishop out of d5. So your eye's on queen a3. But white's checkmating way faster than black with this, right? Queen a4, queen h5, anything. And white's up a whole rook by now. Oh, Colton just moved. Knight b6. Covering d5. Knight could go to c4 from here at some point, but most of all, I think black wants to hold these light squares so the king doesn't get bothered from this diagonal. Now, bishop f3 to h5, that's the best thing we see for white so far. Does bishop f3 work? Yeah, Dabo, they do. They do. And I often work on endgames, one piece at a time. It's a pretty typical way for people to work on endgames. And then I can just feel that I'm seeing that one piece better. I worked on knight endgames for a while, and I felt like I got just better at seeing what the knights could maneuver in every phase of the game, opening, middle game, and endgame. And how other pieces interact with the knight and where to set up to be safe from your opponent's knights and so forth. So, yeah, I have that opinion. Yeah, Alex, it's a little tough to see a really good threat from black right now, huh? Maybe bishop d4 and then take on b2? We're going to play this for white, and then maybe this. And if here, we can consider this move. Now that move's not really checky, so what if white just ignores us? Feels like white's attack is way faster than black's there. Huh, white's attack's pretty fast there, especially without the knight on e7 to, you know, defend or trade any of those squares. This bishop coming to g6 is faster than you might expect. Maybe throwing this move, Dabo. It's not an attack. You asked me for an attacking... Oh, no, somebody else asked me for an attacking idea for black. This is a defensive idea. I'm going to try and confuse the coordination of your bishop and queen. This is a common theme in middle games, that it can be hard to get the queen and the bishop on the right side of each other that they want to be on. You know? Like, it often happens that you've got, you know, bishop d3, queen c2, and then you want to try and get bishop c2, queen d3, but it can be very hard to rearrange them, and your opponent tries to take away one of those squares, and then it's hard to find two other squares on the same diagonal. Rook g5 might look scary, Alexander, until you consider that it allows black's queen into c2. And then I think you can stop worrying. Right? So now it's very hard for the bishop to get to g6 and the queen to get to h5, right? Because the only way she stays in the right area is by blocking her own bishop. And no matter how much you prepare with queen h5 and rook g1 to play rook g5, you're always going to lose to queen c2 pretty much. It's very, very hard to arrange a rook takes g5 that works here. So I think this bishop g5 is actually a devastating defensive move. Yeah, it was mating, Alex, because I didn't tell you I was going to take the rook. I told you I was going to take c2. So I'm not even going to bring your queen to g5, right? There's no queen defending c1 right now. So why would I take your rook? Right. So bishop g5, crushing defensive move. Idea queen g3 to play h4. Sure, you can do that, but when you play h4, the bishop just drops back to h6, or even comes forward to h4, right? And the pawn on h4 is getting in the way of your own queen maneuvers to play queen h7 mate. So I'm just preventing you from organizing on the light squares. I can't defend the light squares, but I can confuse these two pieces to a point where they can't get to those light squares, right? Okay, maybe queen h5, trying to play h4 at some point with the pawn. That makes sense. Yeah. So I was saying maybe next rook g1, and then h4, or maybe even h4 right away, right? So I'm gonna maybe bring another rook to this file, right? Pretty reasonable thing to do. We got a move in the game, which we'll check out in a moment. Hey, good night, Lauren. Been a while. I hope you've been well. Well, this one here is wild. We've got a variety of styles of game. This is a Najdorf, so it's kind of up my alley. Queen g3 was the choice here. Rook f7 defending. And white still trying to work it out. And then the other games we've got... oh, Campbell has won this... has converted this game here. This was our Carl Khan advanced, right? The Endgame. So we saw this right around the critical moment. Bishop f4 check. White opted to take it. It wasn't forced. And I was worried for white that this rook position would be so good that white would really be worse in this endgame. And look at that. Black just aimed at this right away. King's covering these weaknesses, hurting white's counterplay. That's a good try by white, getting that g-pawn. Very good try, but black looks to simplify with the better king. Oof, and white locks away their king. And that looks like pretty much losing. If there's any hope here, it's still going to be this king d2 move. But locked away king, that's going to be bad news. Oh, goes into the endgame. Oh, tricky. Makes a pass pawn. Then blocks the e-pawn. Nice. And queens. Well played king and pawn ending by Campbell. And if white tries a simpler move like king c3, then, you know, king c5, king here, d4. And the two connected pass pawns win this endgame. Yeah, black played this endgame nicely. Just off that king position. And our other remaining game is this one here. White's been playing with an extra pawn for a little bit. We got rook d7, rook b8, stopping bishop b7. White doubled rooks, I assume. Black goes after this bishop. And if the bishop moves somewhere, then it might let the queen in for some degree of harassment and annoyment. So I would strongly consider bishop h5 here, just to not let their queen get into such good position against me. That endgame must have been fun for black. I love just, centralizing my king and winning an endgame just because I knew to centralize my king. It feels great. C4, looking to get the queen over. I really wanted to get the queen over, Lauren. I'd already been thinking if black plays g6 to stop me from f7 to keep trying to run this bishop out of squares, I was looking at queen b4 to get my queen, back into the game, so to speak, because I sensed some potential action on the king side, but I didn't notice this geometry you mentioned of c4 to just bring her back like this. Knight f3, queen f3. Black can take one of these pawns and maybe the other one on the next move, but we're going to take on f7. So maybe, sorry, my mouse is not working very well. Maybe queen here, so that after the trade and trade, my queen comes back to the more centralized square. And, we want to play rook d7, but we got to get rid of back rank mate first. White's got some potential here, but black may also defend. It's not critically bad just yet here. I enjoy bishop g5 knight or for both sides, Armoda. I think it's a great opening. All around great opening. All right, white chose bishop e4. So now we're really going to see this queen come into e4, and what's white going to do? Maybe just play queen c2 and just kind of cover things. Yeah, the problem with going to that position, Lauren, is that we started out with an extra pawn. So to do all that and give up our extra pawn, I would want something very concrete in that endgame, because I feel very comfortable in my chances to convert almost any random ending with an extra pawn here. With white having the open file with the rooks, the bishop versus knight, I feel you take the queens off the board, white's winning. You take the queens off the board and even make one little worsening of my pawn structure, I'm probably even still winning. You take the queens off the board and tell me I'm going to make one or two mistakes in the endgame. I think I could win with one or two small mistakes even. So, the white position is so good right now that when we compare that with something like this feels kind of, I don't know what the best English word is for this. In French, we would say fade. Just it's not very colorful or flavorful. It's kind of, not enough. Not enough. I look at that endgame there. It's kind of like a comparison thing. It's just that we're starting with something so good, That endgame with the activity, it looks nice, but you would guess maybe there's a 40 or 50% chance that it's objectively winning for white, 50 to 60% chance that it's objectively drawn, but you can still put some pressure on the opponent. Whereas this one here, I'm thinking it's 100% chance I'm winning if I play well. So let's see. Let's have a look at this discomfort. Can black bother us much with this queenie here? How's this going? Maybe I should just play h3. Just get it over with. Get rid of my back rank, right? And just keep going. Queen g5, I suppose. Maybe just flex that all queen trades are winning for white. The knight's not terrible on h4, but we can handle it. The bishop on e4 is actually pretty well placed against that knight. And that's sort of like a typical pattern. And I'm just going to keep flexing that, black can't afford a queen trade. I'm just saying I'm 100% to win this endgame. So I just bully this queen. And yeah, I can do whatever. I could play g3 if I want. I could play a4, king h2. A lot of little improving moves I can play from here, but you see I have taken over the center with these pieces. I've got the file, got all the diagonals. You know, just very comfortable. Very comfortable. So it looks like queen e2 is not a huge problem for white here. Goloshigeno playing overall a very good controlled game here. Black's thinking, you know, does queen e2 do something, or do I have anything better than that? They don't have anything great, so it's like a pretty tough position to play. You want to really look for some sparkling and creative counterplay on the king side, right? I guess there you've got 4 against 3 pawns for black. Knights on the king side, some shot at white's king, but maybe f5 should be played right away to kick the bishop off the dominant square before things get worse. Is bishop b1 a thing sometimes? I assume you mean with the idea of queen c2, right? Okay, knight without armor plays f5. And it doesn't especially appeal to me 11 years. That's right, Alexander, yeah. That game was just awful. Awful game, but yeah. Okay, Lauren's looking at sacking the bishop and going for mate. Holy moly. Let's have a look. Because this is what we've wanted, is to get this queen centralized, right? That's been the strong instinct for me the last 3 or 4 moves. So queen here. Okay, black might have other moves like rook e8 or whatever here, but we're going to start off by looking at the basic, taking the piece, right? And then Lauren plays rook takes g7. She's threatening mate in 1 on h6. Black can take with the king, or maybe another defensive move is knight f5, stopping the mate. King takes, rook check, king here, and mate. That's sound. That's beautiful. Scintillating. So now let's look at knight f5. And another scintillating move possible for Lauren to prove her point here, right? I think she can just leave the rook hanging on g7 and just bring in the next piece. Ooh la la. Now she's just threatening mate, right, in 1 on h7. And if knight takes, queen takes, and she comes in here. I would be shocked if black had a defensive move here after rook d7. Sorry to interrupt myself again. I'm just always jotting down positions for students. Okay, let's go back. So I think that at this point here, rook g7 is winning. So that means here, black would need one of these rook e8 moves to work, right? There's also rook f6, right? Trying to keep the queen away from this stuff. But I know she can always tempo the rook if the rooks disconnect, which gives us time to save the bishop. So it's going to have to be rook to e8. I just saved them to a Word document, Alex, yeah. And then I build basically tests for dojoers out of some of these positions. So let's try rook e8, queen f7. That should save the bishop, right? Threat seems good enough. Rook e8 with the other rook. Then Lauren's suggesting rook e7. So then this thing is hanging on e8, so there's no time to take on e4. And rook takes, queen takes, looks hopeless. Is there a trick here with queen e2? We have to be very, very careful when engaged in wild tactics. Honestly, I don't see a saving move for white after queen e2. I feel like the back rank just bit us hard at the worst possible moment. But maybe we can just play rook f1. There's not really a threat on e4 yet, is there? Let's just secure the back rank. Secure the back rank. No, queen e4. It x-ray defends e8, see? Oh. I have a very bad feeling about queen e2. Queen e2. I don't have it open, Alex, but I've opened it so many million times that in my browser I just start typing a couple letters and it pops up, and then I reopen it and add things to it and close it again. I've been putting a lot of puzzles in there for a while. I think queen e2 wins here. I'm going to check this one before we go on. It wins for black. Yeah. No, Alex, on the previous move here, with rook e8, rook e7, if you trade and go knight g6, that should basically never work. There should always be some kind of trick to get out of this now. But I guess this is covered, so it's not so easy. But white has between queen e6 and queen b7. One of those moves is going to be winning. And queen d6 maybe, another one. One of those moves is going to win for white here. They're going to keep the two extra pawns. Pretty much. Or at least one extra pawn with a good position. But rook e8, it does seem to save black here. No easy move for white in response. So queen e6 here would be a false brilliancy. White hasn't moved yet. They've been thinking for a while. Whew. That's hot. Rook e8 is the only defense, Lauren. And instead of queen e6, you know, some kind of bishop move here is good enough probably for white to keep their advantage. I'm thinking bishop d3 perhaps. So you go to c4 or b5 or f1. I don't like the idea of tucking into b1, in other words. I think that's the worst place to go. Somebody in chat was asking, can we play rook g7 first, right? That was truly insane, right? They want to sack the rook without even black having spent a tempo on the bishop. Really hard to imagine that working, but okay, rook f7, there's queen e5, and you pick off this rook. Rook b7, the bishop's on it, and then there's rook b7 winning the queen. Uh-oh. Why would I not be able to defend this for black? That's completely insane. when you say time to tall it up, you mean like go in for this sacrificial line, even though it doesn't work, just because it's murky and hard to find the right moves. The thing is, like, when you're basically winning technically, it's a very odd moment. It's just not the percentage to go in for the Dark Forest. I love the Dark Forest, but this is not the time or the place for it, you know? When you're up a full pawn with full control of the D file and just technically winning position, you know? It's just, when you're completely winning, I can't coin flip here. I'm sorry. I mean, your concept was beautiful. But I think not all is lost, because we could use this as a defensive problem for black. I'm pretty sure the only move to stay in the game is rook e8 with the B rook. It's not insanely hard to find rook b to e8. But to find rook b to e8 and the follow-up move of queen e2 after rook e7, because I think queen e2 is also going to be the only move there. Two only moves in a row. I think that's a good enough puzzle that we can use that one. So let's go f5, queen e6, and grab that. You like your Toyotas, huh, Durian? I've been streaming chess since 2009, KV. Shigeno still thinking here. So only f5's been played so far. Why do I grab the positions? To create tests for dojoers, Lauren. I actually have a major quip with how major gripe. Whew, the English language escaping me. I have a major gripe with how almost all tactical puzzles and testing is presented. And so I'm grabbing positions in order to be able to provide what I think are better quality tests. Gelo Shigeno taking this very seriously, this move here. I'm fine with positions being from real games or being composed either way, Jared. I think the number one mistake in how tactics are presented is that they're almost always positions with one winning move. And even if those positions come from real games, that is not really the type of that's only a small subset of calculations that you do in games, are like just positions where you know there's one winning move and no other winning move. Also, One of the hardest things in a real game is knowing when to calculate, or knowing what kind of a thing you're looking for. Are you looking for a move that wins a pawn, or a move that wins a queen, or right? To have that instinct for when to look and how good a thing you're looking for is very important. You don't have that in a game. So when people are solving puzzles, they know exactly what they're looking for, right? So if you show somebody this position in a puzzle book, they'll immediately come up with Lauren's brilliant idea, which none of us would think of while just playing along, right? Of queen e6, fe4, rook g7. They'll immediately think of it and slam it out and, oh, they're a genius, puzzle rating 3000. But in a real game, half the time these brilliant moves don't work because of rook e8. Or some like amazing defense, rook e8, rook e7, queen e2. So then they don't put it in the tactics book because it's not a simple winning variation. And the truth is, people are playing queen e6 in their tactics without even looking for counter moves for the opponent. Right? So Agard and Sokolov are probably great trainers, Alexander, but even they, I think, well, I don't know for sure what position Sokolov uses, but I have seen Agard's work. Even Agard, who's, arguably one of the 2 or 3 best trainers in the world now, even Agard, he gives problem sets where every single position has one move that's better than all the other moves. But in real life, there are some positions where there are 3 good moves, some where there are no good moves, some where there are 2 good moves. So when I'm creating my puzzle sets, there's always some positions where there's no answer, essentially, right? Where you're just supposed to say, we back off with bishop d3. We don't play a tactic, right? Or a position with 2 different winning moves and 3 moves that don't work. So if you're just on the autopilot tactic mode, you just assume one of them is the answer, but it's not so clear, right? Because 2 of them are looking promising, so you remain confused, right? Is that right, Stamen? So I was okay with my quip? You're right, Lauren. After queen e6, rook b8, there's only one move that still draws for white, and it's bishop b7. So very, very nice find, Lauren. And that's the kind of calculation that's really, really good to have in practice. That's the kind of calculation that's really, really critical to be able to do those little calculations back and forth of lines that don't necessarily line up perfectly as like, oh, bam, 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 checkmate. Oh, bam, 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 we win the queen. That kind of practice of just like forced wins, that's good for players like 1200, 1300. But at a certain point, that's not what you're really facing in games. In games, you don't know what you're looking for. Priming someone to know they're looking for a forced win basically makes the training useless after a certain level. Essentially useless. So I think it's very, very important. People hate it now because they're used to stuff that's not good for them. People hate the Chess Dojo tests, by the way. It's like our least popular product. They hate it. They hate it because it's good for them, right? It's like, how many kids are clamoring for, I don't know, spinach and broccoli and I don't know, kale or something, right? They hate it because it's good for them, and it's harder than just solving a bunch of made in twos when somebody's told you in advance that they're made in twos. Yeah, thanks for looking that up, Stamen. That's kind of curious. I mean, I really thought that I was wrong, but I wonder if somewhere I'd seen that secondary meaning at some point. I don't have a time estimation on when you'll get new tests and maxing. Sorry. There's a lot of chaos in my life, and the dojo's working on a bunch of different things at the moment. But, basically once you're past a certain rating level, almost all the normal tactics trainers are pointless, because just because you know that there's a win means that the training is almost pointless to you. Okay, Genu is saying this rook takes g7 idea might be a draw. After rook g7, king g7, we had queen e6. I mentioned rook f7. There could be queen e5, king h7, queen b8, fe4, and then what would it be? Like rook d8, Genu? No, then knight g6, it feels like white doesn't quite have enough. But, I mean, let's just say white's got 3 pawns against a knight here, so it doesn't take some amazing move for white for this position to be about equal. Maybe Genu just stopped and evaluated around here. Said it's like 3 pawns for a knight and the game just keeps going. Maybe you centralize your queen. Although queen e2 might look slightly annoying again. I don't know. But, sure, Lauren. Answer rook b8. It's bishop b... I mentioned that you found bishop b7. Is it something different or deeper than that? Center and yeah. So yeah, so when I'm making puzzle sets, one important thing is I want to mix tactical positions, strategic positions, positions with 1 answer, positions with no answers, positions with 3 answers, etc. Then another thing about how we do it, which Jesse and Kostia are in agreement with me on, is we don't tell you the defensive moves. You have to not only find the offensive move, but also the defensive move. So let's say that queen e6 was working here. To get full credit on the puzzle, you would have to have seen rook e8, rook e7, and put in that rook e8 defense for your opponent. You would have had to see rook fe8, queen f7. You would have to see the idea of queen e6, pawn takes bishop, rook takes g7, that black play knight f5 instead of king takes. You have to predict all the resources for the other player, right? And you have to put in advance like how you're going to handle each one of them. So your responsibility is to find your opponent's resources, not just play the most violent move, let the computer play some defense, and then you only have to find the next most violent move, etc., etc., etc. Sure, tactical puzzles are, they're fun, and they're not completely useless, and, they're fun, they're pretty. They may show you a new pattern every now and then that you didn't know, even if you were a pretty good player. But their value's like decreasing dramatically, right? Like they're not the ideal kind of work that a player in the 1600 to 2200 range should be doing, right? A player past 1600, the ideal tactical work for them is of a different nature at that point. All right, Gelo Shigeno, by my count, thinking maybe 15 minutes already on this move. Shall we check the Najdorf statement? That's a good point. Let's go check the Najdorf. I mean, we had a lot to look at and think about here, but the Najdorf game is really cool as well. Let's back up a few moves and catch up to where we were. So we were at queen h4, f6, knight b6, queen g3, rook f7, covering the pawn. Now bishop f3, maybe heading to h5. Black hits a pawn sack. Absolutely no cb3, queen c1, right? Sorry about... I don't know if it's my mouse or chess.com, but I'm really struggling with arrows and stuff lately. So it's going to be a takes b3, maybe. Then black's planning to throw in bishop c1, so I play c3 here. Get a Tradovich. I'm so tempted to look for something more destructive here as black. Something like some version of a3. So I think this is the live position. We've already caught up, so we can look at one other option here for black. Let's just look at it sort of an instinctive move for me. This is kind of an instinct. It creates maximum destruction on my opponent's king's pawn structure. Now, the line I'm most concerned about is that they managed to take this way, take this way, take this way, and then cover all these pawns. Do I have a follow-up? worthy of... Well, I need something really powerful here. Because I just sacked a couple pawns, right? So go here with the idea of queen a3. 1 second. What's that? Less loud? I guess so. Okay, there's some requests that I be less loud, so sorry, Dojo. I don't have an office, you know. I've been at this for a long time, but I don't yet have a place, a dedicated space from which to broadcast, from which to stream. So you might have to turn the sound up on your computers. This is reasonably threatening. There's no easy answer for white against this. Because rook a1 is just going to lose to queen c3. And we're being told that white went for it in that pawn up position. They went for queen e6. Holy moly. So the only move I'm really seeing is b4. But knight a4 poses some real problems. If the king steps on the a file, then you can play knight takes c3 discovered check. That wins. If the king goes this way, it allows queen c2. If the king goes to b1, then knight c3 is check. And if the king goes to b3, queen c4 is check. So this wins right here. Black just wins. Wow. How do you feel about that, folks? Rook a7. I think it's winning. I don't see any defensive move for white here. Thanks for the raid, Innate Optimist. Very kind of you. And welcome to our new viewers. This is Friday Night Fights. Innate Optimist tends to stream pretty late. We often raid her at the end of Friday Night Fights. But these are just normal chess players who are playing classical games against each other on a Friday night, and I'm watching and commenting. Okay, I think there's no defense here, and I'm going to check myself with the computer. Yes, I got it right. Computer says that's death. So then the other option for white is going to be rook b2 in this position instead of king b2. And that was not so easy to see how black's supposed to break through, but maybe just start with sending a rook over here. And yeah. Okay, now I want to know, was bishop c1 the best move in this position? Let me see if the computer will tell me. Oh my gosh. Nailed this one. The best move for black is bishop takes c1. Right on. And then rook c1, a3. Ho-ho! Yeah. I found it. All right, folks. So that hopefully makes a little bit of an impression on you, and some of you might remember what we're going to call the maximum destruction pattern, right? We don't take. We get rid of the knight that's covering that square, and we put all the pawns like this. We just annihilate the area. That's a very powerful technique. It's a very powerful technique. It doesn't win every time. It's just a thing you have to calculate. Sometimes it just loses your pawns and fails horribly. But it's worth looking at. It's worth looking at. That's right, Foos Chess. Collections of puzzles should include some more defensive puzzles. That's part of the variety that's needed. Basically, they need to remove the priming where you know exactly what you're looking for, right? And that means there needs to be just more variety in the kind of puzzles you're solving. All right, so let's follow the game. We get check, knight takes, bishop drops back. Black's position's still all around pleasant, you know. The knight may at some point come here, though we really have to watch out for bishop d5. And we have the a3 moves coming at some point anyway, so it's still like a pleasant position for white. And now we're going to switch to the other game for a moment. a3 breakthrough coming from Colton. Very nice move. And Colton's got a big time lead here, so it's looking good for them. But we're hearing that sacrificial madness is being unleashed here by Golo Shigeno. They go for queen e6. Only one defensive move, rook e8, is not found. Fe4. Boom! The destruction! I tried to be excited, but quietly there. I'm very excited about this. So, Gelo Shigeno gets rewarded for going into the deep dark forest, making the Tau move, even though it didn't work. Calculated for 22 minutes here. So not just assuming I'm up a pawn, I'll eventually win, I don't need to play precise moves. No, Gelo Shigeno is really trying to play this game well. The move doesn't quite work. And I assumed that Gelo Shigeno missed queen e2, that they saw rook e8, rook e7, that both players saw rook e8, rook e7, and said, yeah, that doesn't do it. So black goes here, and now we know that this is checkmate. So white's being rewarded for their bravery, in a sense. But I almost feel like they should be punished for their risk-taking, because that position was just winning if the bishop retreated to d3. Knight without armor. Taking some blows on here. Maybe 6 minutes was not long enough after queen e6. White thought for so long. And maybe here, knight without armor should have used, 10 or 20 minutes. Basically used all that they had to make sure that they'd found some kind of a defense. But it is definitely props to Gelo Shigeno for using their time at that moment, for having that attitude for looking for maximal stuff. Also, they played rook g7 in seconds, which is very professional. It means before they played queen e6, they had probably considered both rooks to e8, pawn takes e4. They'd considered a few candidate moves for black, I think, before playing queen e6. So it's a very, masterful time usage here. Yeah, for sure. You plug this into a computer, it doesn't give you the human feeling of like working on this puzzle, right? We found rook e8 and queen e2 on our own, right? And then we only checked with the computer to see that that was indeed a defense for black. We found the moves. We went through, a 10 minute or so process ourselves of like analyzing a bunch of variations. So we understand what the player's situation is like more as they're thinking about it. And again, as I've said, this is the kind of situation that's more game-like, and that's why puzzles are so different. In a game, you don't know if queen e6 is working or not. If I gave you this in a puzzle book, you would assume queen e6 was the answer. You might just play it without seeing any defenses or looking at anything, right? So they don't know, and black doesn't know there's a defense here after queen e6. They don't know if they should resign or if there's some like hidden win, and That's really like the critical feel of playing chess, right? Is that uncertainty around what's going on. I'm very curious, as Alexander is asking, I'm very curious if black plays knight f5, if black plays knight f5, I'm very curious if white pounds out rook d7 as well. Like if they've confidently looked and double checked that many moves ahead. I'm very curious to know. Very curious. Yeah, but both these games are turning into tactical slugfest. So here we got a3, bishop d5, going after that rook on f7. My first thought is, can you just give the rook on f7, play pawn takes b2? I mean, destroying the pawn structure seems huge. But we got to trade, throwing in a2. That's not destroying the pawn structure. Queen c4. Now, essentially, you've got a traitor pawn on a2, sheltering the king from the a file. I mean, there are some scenarios where you check and force them to take it, and then you get back to work on the a file. But at first blush, I hate a2. Right? Why not just play a move like queen c4 first? Trying to take. And if they take here, of course, we can come in and take all this. Gotta be great if these arrows and things worked. To me, a2 looks like a huge mistake here from Colton, and maybe playing a little bit too fast because you've got 40 minutes. I mean, yeah, I don't like it. Feels very wrong because I feel like if black managed one more pawn trade, their position should be winning. That should be enough to say black is simply winning. And it looks like the pawn trade's almost forced, and then we like fumble it, kind of, right? Fumble the trade. Here's queen g4, looking to go into an endgame. White's been down a pawn for most of this game, but now if you trade queens, you'll be able to collect the pawn on a2 in the endgame. One of the worst things about traitor pawns is they protect your opponent's king in the middle game, and in the endgame they get captured for free. So traitor pawns are just the worst. Just the worst, you know? And the other point of this move is that it's covering d1. So it's dealing with queen f1, because you'll be able to block on d1 with this rook. So queen g4 is a nice looking defensive move from Akil, who's in mild time pressure, but they're going to start feeling it because they're getting down to a point where they won't have enough time left to play an endgame properly. Hi Unicron, hope you're doing well today. Maybe some people call them umbrellas. I call them traitors. Yeah, that's my own term. I didn't see it in a book. It's just what I call it. Gilo Shigeno has won the game already. So after rook g7, black took it. Sorry, a little bit of lag. Black took it and just straight into the mate. The rook on g2 would be hanging Cyberpilot, so white would have to block with the rook, not the queen, in the game we were just at a moment ago. So congrats to Gilo Shigeno, taking the game into the deep dark forest, entertaining us. So here the idea with queen g4 is, whoops, queen b3 just played, okay. Is that against queen f1, you block with the rook, keeping your queen on both rooks. And the game goes on. White defends for now. King with a hat. Okay, so we get the move queen b3. Does this move threaten rook c3? I don't 100% think it does. Could black still make some trouble with bishop c1 and stuff? Sure, the position's still super complicated, but I feel like if pawn traded on b2, black would be winning. It wouldn't be complicated. I think. Okay, queen d1 played, yeah. White again trying to get that queen out of there. And, I was just looking at rook c3, and Colton played it in less than a minute, which is insane when you've got 40 minutes on the clock, I have to say. So here's what I was thinking. Rook c3, which gets played. Pawn takes, right? Queen takes. Rook b2, defending the knight. Then there's this move, bishop c1. Sorry, nothing works on here. Bishop c1, and now you're sort of threatening to take the rook, and then maybe take the knight, and everything in white's position is loose. It almost looks like it could work, right? So I like, it looks plausible enough that I was thinking this is exactly the position I was thinking about. And then before I could calculate anything, Colton plays it. I mean, 45 seconds. If I haven't calculated anything yet, it's not super plausible that the players have that the player has gone very deep into this concept and looked at various defensive moves for white here. I mean, basic moves: queen c2, queen b3, queen c2, rook d2. I mean, everything's fair game once black sacks a rook, right? All candidate moves. Knight d3 to go bishop takes, knight takes. So no, I don't see why you would sack a rook in a good position with tons of time on your clock without thinking about it. You know, you would want to at least think about it long enough to know that it's good or something. But yeah, black kind of gambling a little bit. Now black's thinking a bit. I wonder if there's, I don't know. Is the name of the casino just Nightorf? The appeal of the Brilliancy Prize. I mean, I guess the Brilliancy Prize in a dojo tournament is just that I get excited. Maybe wake my kids. Trying not to do that tonight. That's the big difference, Alexander, yeah. In our other game, Goloshige had probably a winning position, a time lead, and decided to sack, a piece and a rook, going to crazy, gambling complications. But the difference is, Goloshige calculated for 22 minutes before going into it. Colton, 30, 40 seconds. If you spend 30, 40 seconds, it's just not serious, right? Rook b7 doesn't even go for bishop c1, which looks like the more plausible or complicated move. Here it looks like white has maybe winning moves with rook d3 or queen b3 right here. Is it their move? Yeah, they're still thinking. Yeah, ambitiously. Lots of moves for white after bishop c1, such as queen c2. But at least this move wins something back, right? Maybe even queen e1 here is still interesting, but check. Here, takes. Black's down a knight, but if they collect all white's pawns, it's interesting. I'm not saying black shouldn't consider it, right? Remember, this is literally the move I was thinking about when black played it. I was sitting here calculating rook c3. But my point is, if I've got 45 minutes and my opponent's got 12, I'm going to think before playing a move like rook c3. I'm never going to play this move quickly. Right? Never. Did queen e1 check win against king takes a2 as well? Was that even worse? Is this winning? The rook's covering queen d1, which is often the strongest square here. And against this, I think rook d3 holds on. It's still an interesting position, right? But I think it's better to just take on h3 if this doesn't accomplish anything special. I mean, I don't know for sure. But part of the point is, like, I'd have to look at this for 10, 20 minutes to start gaining some confidence about what white and black should or shouldn't be doing, right? And our blunder, so to speak, from Colton is the time usage there. You can't go for such a complicated line after 30 seconds of reflection. I mean, it could be completely losing, it could be completely winning, but you don't know. You're just completely guessing. Now, queen c4. There's kind of a trap here. Queen b3 looks desirable. I think queen b3, rook b4 weirdly loses a piece. Yeah, rook c3 could be completely winning, could be the best move in the position, and I would still say black made a huge mistake by playing it quickly, right? Because they were just guessing. I will never believe that they knew for sure that rook c3 was good in 40 seconds. I just won't believe it. Maybe I would have eventually played rook c3, but I would have really thought about it. Okay, so queen c4, tricky. Rook d to b3 stands out to me as an interesting move for white here. I like rook d to b3. It supports the knight a bunch, and it opens up queen d5. I guess I'd also wonder if rook d6 is good. Rook d6, rook b4, rook d8, king h7. I just don't believe it. We're getting a move. Queen b3 played. Rook b4, queen b4, queen d3, queen b3. Oh yeah, even though queen b3 loses a piece, it simplifies massively. Sometimes losing a piece is the best way to win a game. But hang on. Who's better in this endgame and why? This pawn can get going pretty far. Black's fine in this endgame, I would think. I believe in pawns at the end. Queen b3 pinned the queen, Alexander, so there was no queen c1 after queen b3 in the game position. The line they played. Okay, so white kind of walked into this piece sack on purpose. They played queen b3 seeing rook takes b4. But they might have been better served by this move, which looks super winning. Before playing rook b3, the main move you should have looked at, for anyone in chat who was calculating along, I know some of you are thinking about this move. I just want to tell you, like, if you were going to think of this move, you needed to have seen bishop c1 before you played rook b3. Because this is the move that could make everything fall apart. Right? This is the move that might refute queen d5. It might refute everything. But what I calculated, which I think deals with this, is rook c2. Sorry, I'm just having so much trouble moving things. Rook c2. Obviously, the knight's hanging. But basically, we're threatening to win the bishop, and against queen b3, there's rook c8 with check. And then we collect the queen. So anybody who is looking at rook b3 here, if you were in a game or if you were solving puzzles or whatever it is, you should see bishop c1 for black. That's the move you need to that's the resource for the opponent, that you can't be missing that. Okay, all right, so back to the game. Queen b3, which I don't think this was the best white could do, for sure. I think the rook b3 move was completely winning. This is tricky. Maybe if we got our king into light squares, white could become better, but maybe if these pawns get a little bit further, black could be better. I don't know why black spent a temp on bishop f4. Doesn't it make sense to take some light squares? I guess white's got this move. Boom, that'll save your pawn if you're paying attention. I don't know what bishop f4 is about at all. It's a pretty random move. Oh, against king h7, blobiciously, queen h5, bishop h6, queen g6 mate, right? And against king f7, maybe queen h5, king e7, queen e8. King d6. Where's the black rook? It's on b7, right? If it's on b7, then we've got mate with queen c6, queen e6. You're right. It's not mate in 1, but I think it's mate in like 2 or 3. Let me try and remember where all the pieces are. Black's queen's on b3, covering the mate on e6. So king d6, queen c6, king e7. Well, there's queen b7 with check, and then it's easy to mate. Yeah. So you're correct, blobiciously. White can mate instead of taking the queen. I did not bother looking at that when I calculated my line. I didn't see that detail. Okay, bishop f4, rook b4. Trying to stop the move e4. That makes sense. Here comes the king. So king c2, king h6, king d3, king g5, king e4. White's king makes it in time, and now white's going to have the advantage. So even here, the right move for black was this, right, Philomes? To still go for this pawn. Because you can come here. Defend that. And this way, you're not letting the white king approach your pawns and blockade them, right? The problem is, like, if this king's on e4, you can't move anything. You lose all mobility to your pawns, right? So even with this bishop f4 move order, correct e4, I'm guessing, and you're still good. But now that white king's going to come to e4, and I would say black's in some danger. It's possible to lose that position. Correct, Alexander. Okay, so the king's going to come to h4. And I guess white's going to play rook h3 to defend the pawn. Yeah, bishop f4 is a very weird looking move. Could we go bishop d2 to c3 instead? Yeah. Potentially it looks like a fine move. I guess my issue with this move, though, is there's king here, here, here. Right? And we get frozen. And to me, the priority is to get control of a light square with these pawns because we've got a dark squared bishop. The main way to not win this endgame as black is to get these pawns frozen. Because I think black's better here. And I think e4 does the trick, you know? That's like the priority, the thing to do. Yeah, the bishop move was to get out of the way of the king, but... King h4, yeah, so we're going to get something like rook b3, bishop e3, rook b7, bishop h6, rook b3, bishop e3, something like that is what makes sense to me here. Rook b7. Yeah, so bishop h6, rook b3, etc. I think it's just got to be a repetition draw right now. Just watching some chess. Just watching some chess. I think nobody's really pressing Alex. I just see it as a draw now. As do the players. Chess.com says a well-played game that ended in a draw. 4 great moves, 16 best moves, lots of good moves in the game. Yeah. So it's a draw. And now my question is, what's the best black could do in this endgame? Could they have played e4 for advantage? Oh. Computer shows an idea that I hadn't thought of at the time. It's a very similar idea. It's to fight for the light squares with g6. Now, after fg6, king g7, white can't stop you from playing f5 and e4 at some point. So it's a very tough position for white now. Very tough defense. But the computer does not say that e4 is winning. So why is e4 not winning? Like, what's the main defensive idea? King c2. So now I can play d3 check, but then I can't defend my e-pawn, or I can play bishop e5. Computer plays rook b1. And why is white good here? Because I can't get the f-pawn here in any way. By now, against g6, there's rook g1. Oh, God, let me draw an arrow, chess.com. By now, g6, there's rook g1. And long term, I can never keep these pawns stable here. Right? Like, if I come here, this king just needs to stay close enough. And this is a drawing technique for white. You just keep embracing the d3 pawn. And if black ever stops harassing you, you'll attack the e-pawn with your rook. Right? So they just have to go back and forth with you. So you really need the g6 move. That's super cool. That's super cool. You just really need g6 so that you have f5 available. That's cool. That's very cool. Very interesting. You were definitely lost at some point in the game, Matt Club, and you were also probably winning at some point in the game. It was a very intense game. You know, I think you're right that when your opponent played b3, opening up your king position, and then later a3, I think they were winning. Then they sacked the rook on c3, and I think it was not quite working afterwards. I thought maybe where you played queen b3, that instead rook b3 would be winning. But yeah, it was a very, very exciting game. Lots of fun stuff. We looked at it for a long time. We've been watching the game pretty much through the whole thing. So you'll be able to go back at some point and watch the recording if you want to compare some of your thoughts with ours. But it was super exciting. Great game for me to watch, and I think the chat enjoyed it too. And yeah, fun times, folks. With that, we're gonna wish you a good rest of your Saturday, since most of you are probably not in the Americas. And for those of you who are in the Americas like me, we're gonna get to bed. We're gonna get some sleep. So take care of yourselves, everybody. Get some rest. Eat well, exercise, sleep well, and we'll see you Black Market. and we'll see you in the near future. All right. Cheers, everybody. Be well. Let me try and send some kind of a raid off somewhere. I don't see anybody streaming chess. Weird. All right. We won't bother looking too hard for a stream. We'll just say goodnight.